Ian, the news broke late yesterday afternoon that we're moving the Salford fixture to a Thursday, bringing it forward 24 hours. Are you able to shed any light on the reasons behind that for us?
I can shed a lot of light on it, obviously, because it's been an issue that's been occupying myself particularly, and Nigel Wood and Ralph Rimmer at the RFL, and a lot of other people for the last 6 to 8 weeks or so. But in fact, the problem goes back further than that. So it's quite a complicated answer, but I think that people will recognise that what Wigan have done within this area is the best that we can possibly do. But the only way I can say that is by explaining what is a complex background. The source of the problem is fixturing at the beginning of the year. So, for example, we identified on the 27th of September, before the fixtures were issued, that there would be a problem with this game and a number of other games, because of course we have the Football League fixtures, and what we attempt to do and what Wigan Athletic attempt to do is to avoid clashes of any type. So for example, and I actually looked up the document, that document is a document that we submit every year that asks for high priority changes in terms of fixtures. And we put 7 of those in to avoid clashes with Wigan Athletic, which is the norm, and it's exactly the same in football. People do precisely the same to avoid problems.
So that's something we've done in the past, and
we always
there haven't been any great issues up until this point.
There are always issues, but normally they're soluble issues. You can get round things by moving games here and there. It's made rather more complicated by 2 other factors. One is the Thursday night television by Sky of games can cause clashes with games the previous Sunday because of the 4-day turnaround issue, which is another issue I'll just explain. And the second thing that has complicated it is with where the World Club Challenge is, there is normally an empty fixture. So one would not have expected Salford, in this case, to be playing the previous weekend to the clash on the 27th of February. Yeah. But because of the fact that the decision was taken that the bottom 4 clubs in Super League would come into the Challenge Cup a week earlier, the difficulty that gives is that for that Challenge Cup round they would have to postpone their Super League fixtures, which causes even more disruption through the calendar. So the RFL agreed that Salford could play Widnes and Hull KR against Wakefield on the weekend of the World Club Challenge, which meant that Salford were playing on the Sunday. We were supposed to play them the following Friday. So the source of the problem is the fact that fixturing is very difficult. We got 5 out of 7 of our high priority fixture changes, but the RFL failed to avoid the other 2. So we've got the Easter Monday problem that we know about and have known about for a long time, and the Salford problem on the Friday night. Let's deal with the Wigan Athletic issue, because I think that's quite important. Okay. Our relationship with Wigan Athletic, particularly since David Sharp took over as chairman, is excellent. It's getting better literally by the week. We cooperate wherever possible, and we don't get told to do things. We have discussions with people about what is sensible and what is reasonable. It's not just rugby league, it's a problem with lots of television of sports games and competitions and rules and clashes that occur. So this is a difficult problem, and I'm not blaming the RFL for not being able to solve it at all. So if we go back to the Salford game in particular, we are supposed to play on the Friday night before a pretty important Wigan Athletic game the following day against Bury. I'm a supporter of Wigan Athletic. I know there's a very small minority of our fans and of their fans who hate each other, but I think that's old-fashioned and silly. And if our spectators and their spectators would realise how much we work together, that will be better for the long term, and eventually we will get there. I understand the grief of supporters who can't make the Thursday night, when the game was originally scheduled for Friday. And in particular, I've seen a couple of emails from Steve Ashcroft and from Neil Parkinson typifying the anger and irritation that they can't make the game. But going back to the key issue, if we take the Friday night, we accept that with the state of the pitch in February, particularly as it was 2 weeks ago, the idea of us playing on the Friday night and then playing an important game on the Saturday was just crazy. It just wouldn't work. That's why in September we identified that problem before Wigan Athletic ever said anything. This is not Wigan Athletic telling Wigan Warriors that we can't do that. We have anticipated from 6 months ago the problem and sought to avoid it. So all the allegations that we're not doing anything about it and we're just being told are just factually inaccurate. From Carol Madden to Chris Radlinski to me, we've been very focused on trying to avoid these problems for a long time. When the fixtures came out in October as draft fixtures, we objected. Our objection was not taken notice of, and it still was fixtured for the Friday, which we knew we couldn't make. We've been talking about all the different options since then with the RFL as the fixturing authority. And it's their job to sort out fixtures. It's not Wigan and Salford's fault. It's for the RFL and Super League. And they have worked very hard with us to try and reach an accommodation. So we can't play on the Friday night because even with the new pitch now, if we play Friday night and we play Saturday on that new pitch, which has only been down for 2 weeks by then, we run a severe risk that we could possibly, between the two games in 20 hours or whatever it is, cut up the pitch. So we have no problem with the fact the game cannot take place on Friday night. That is a sensible, logical decision in the interest of both clubs. And anybody who thinks it's Latics telling us what to do has got the wrong end of the stick. But it's important for me to explain that so that people understand it. I understand that might be the line of least resistance. So let's deal with what are the options that we could have done and what we have been trying to do for the last 6 to 8 weeks very, very seriously. In fact, to the point of distraction from the World Club Series on occasions. And I have to say, in 9 years of being at Wigan, this is the most difficult problem we've ever had in fixturing terms during that 9-year period. Option number one is play on the Thursday or play on the Sunday. We suggested that weeks and weeks and weeks ago. It's not allowed because the RFL have a view that if we played on the Thursday and Salford are playing Widnes the previous Sunday, that's a 4-day turnaround for Salford and that's not allowable. If we play on the Sunday after Latics game on the Saturday, unfortunately, Sky have chosen Salford's next home game against Warrington to be a TV game, so it's been brought forward to the Thursday. So again, Sunday to Thursday, 4-day turnaround. The RFL's view is that the clubs have voted not to allow, under any circumstances, 4-day turnarounds. We have a slightly different view of that. We have a view that is that the clubs prefer not to have 4-day turnarounds, but there is no absolute edict that there cannot be a 4-day turnaround. And we've agreed to differ on that issue. I can well understand that Salford don't want to do a 4-day turnaround. We objected to it when we ended up in that position the year before last, for example, but we complied with the rules, which at the time would have allowed a 4-day turnaround, as they do now. But the RFL prefer for clubs to reach an accommodation if there's a difficulty. So we can't do Thursday, we can't do Sunday. What's the next option that comes about from that we explored? We explored reversing the fixture. We are scheduled to play Salford on, I think it's June the 3rd, which unfortunately is when the pitch is under major renovation. And we're going to have to face major renovation. We and Wigan Athletic are talking about that and the fact that we need to solve the problem long term of a high water table and drainage difficulties and deal with the issue properly at some point in time. But if you bear in mind that's somewhere between £500,000 and £1 million, that's not a simple solution. Whereas doing what's been done at the moment, which is to re-turf the stadium, is more than £100,000, but it's not £150,000, and is a sensible, pragmatic, short-term move. So we can't move the fixture for two reasons. We can't play a home game in June, and secondly, Salford couldn't play reversing the fixture because Sale are playing at home that weekend. It's the problem of shared stadiums, but shared stadiums are a fact of life financially within rugby as they are within football.
Yeah.
It's got to be that way. We've just got to face that problem and deal with it. So for two reasons we can't reverse the fixture. So you then get towards the unpalatable, and it was suggested very strongly to us that we should consider Leigh or Bolton, which we considered briefly, to find out that Bolton have a home game that weekend, so one couldn't play on the Friday night, and that Leigh have 4 games in 10 days on their pitch, so that couldn't be done at Sports Village, for which I was quite pleased, to be frank, because I maintain a view that says, whilst for the Challenge Cup competition, which has to be played on a specific weekend, you would very reluctantly consider moving a game as we had to last year, with all the consequences of that for our fans and everybody, and the financial mess that it entails, because it costs us about 75 grand to move a game to an away location. I have a simple view in terms of Wigan that we should not accept under any circumstances moving a league game to another club. Having been asked to look at it and being relieved that Leigh and Bolton were not possible, we were then instructed in fairly strong terms that we had to be rather more serious about looking at looking at a game away at another stadium. Yeah. Not enforced yet, but very clear direction. And it was suggested that Rochdale or Blackpool were places that we should look to play on the Friday night. And I'm talking about 3 weeks ago, because this debate, discussion, argument, and a strong stance from Wigan about this particular game has been going on for the last 2 months. We refused to contemplate playing at Blackpool or Rochdale and felt that was not apt within the Super League environment, and that it was not right for our supporters to have to consider doing that. We were then presented with the option of Widnes, who the RFL were able to organise to play on that Friday night. And one cannot argue against the fact that Widnes is a Super League ground. It's not that far away. And if we were compelled to play at that ground, the only arguments against it would have been it's not right to move a game away. Yeah. And in the short term, because we're talking about a week ago, we were told the Widnes option in some detail. I took the decision, me alone, that we would not do that. We will not move a home game away from Wigan. But as at 2 weeks ago, that was the option that was available. We hadn't been instructed that it was absolutely definite, but it was made very clear that we should contemplate that fully. I responded with a request for a postponement of the game, but unfortunately, under the rules of Rugby League, you can only postpone a fixture with an agreed substitute date. And if you look forward over the next 6 months, there are no available substitute dates at the weekend. The only possibility is the Monday after the Challenge Cup final. And as the RFL pointed out, there was a fairly strong chance that Wigan might be in the Challenge Cup, just as might be other leading clubs, obviously. So to depend upon playing Salford on the Monday, and Salford might, particularly with the way they played last weekend, Salford might be in the Challenge Cup final as Hull KR were last year. So postponement became not an option either, because there is no alternative fixture availability that the clubs would agree to, because of course it's got to be at a weekend. So we're back to playing at Widnes as an option. And we have taken the principal view that to move a Super League game away from your home ground for a league game is not something that should be agreed to. That takes us to a week ago, with the match in prospect and us being distracted from the World Club Series by a genuine problem. Mm-hmm. I'm not blaming anybody in this scenario. It is a difficult fixturing problem for Salford, for Wigan, for the RFL, for Super League. But the ultimate that was likely to happen, and that was more than hinted at, was that if we did not fulfil the fixture because we refused to play it on another ground, then it was highly likely that we would be docked the 2 points and we would be fined a severe amount, which I understand the RFL might have to do. And that's a very difficult scenario for Wigan. It's a very difficult scenario for Wigan directors to make a decision as to what to do. But we took the view that we should not move the game away from Wigan. And I think that's a principle that we should stay to unless anything else possibly comes on the agenda. Finally, with the deadline rapidly approaching, because of Wigan's refusal to contemplate moving it elsewhere, an accommodation was finally reached between the RFL, Super League, Wigan, Salford, that allowed a 4-day turnaround. I feel slightly sorry for Salford that they've got a 4-day turnaround, but we've only got a 4 and 3/4 day turnaround from the Brisbane game. The solution has been the least bad solution. It's not a good solution for the fans. It's not a good solution for Salford. It's not a good solution for Wigan, the RFL or Super League. But it is the least bad one. And I think our fans need to recognise that we have taken some very principled stands. It's got nothing to do with Wigan Athletic. We agree with Wigan Athletic that it would be nonsense to play Friday night and Saturday on the pitch. And if anything, it's brought Wigan Athletic and Wigan Warriors even closer together in terms of pragmatic solutions.
So it's quite clear really that there's a lot of work been going on behind the scenes, unseen by the fans, and this has not just crept up to us in the last couple of weeks and we've said, oh dear, we're going to have to move this game, right, okay, we'll just move it to the Thursday on a whim and completely disregard the fans, as has been some of the comments on social media in the last 12 hours.
That is totally not true. And I'm a great believer, wherever possible, in keeping many of the negotiations confidential. But in this particular case, the outpouring from the Wigan fans can't be allowed not to be educated by the reality of what's happened. I fully understand the Wigan fans' annoyance, and I would imagine on the Salford board there'll be annoyance at a 4-day turnaround as well. It is just a very, very complex and difficult fixturing problem that we anticipated a long time ago, that Chris and I particularly have spent 6 weeks leaning on the RFL to try to reach a resolution and give them the due. You know, Nigel Wood, Ralph Rimmer, Brian Barwick, Richard Bowker from the Super League non-executive role have all been involved in trying to find a solution to what is an immensely difficult problem. And in the end, we've got a solution that is not ideal, but it's a hell of a lot better than losing 2 points or playing away at Widnes or postponing a game knowing you're going to have to play it midweek later in the season if you're lucky, with all the fights that would involve again.
Can we learn anything from this incident to do something better if something like this were to happen again with a fixture, for example, in 12 months' time?
I think what we must learn, and what I would ask of the Wigan fans, is that they would trust us to do the best thing for this club. And we have done that. We have done that extensively for a long time. We're also good at anticipating problems. Yeah. But in some cases, you anticipate it, you try to avoid it, but it is too difficult. I think if there is a lesson that is learnt, it probably is that the Super League clubs and the RFL should deal with the 4-day turnaround problem and see if it's possible to come up with a formula, perhaps involving some compensation for a club at some point in time if ever we get up into this awfully difficult situation. Because I know Hull KR suffered very badly last year by having a number of their Sunday games, Sunday being their home game, being moved to Friday or to Saturday, at considerable financial cost to them, which they objected to, and quite understandably, because it costs a lot of money to move a fixture away from your normal day. It will cost us money to move from Friday to Thursday, as well as the inconvenience to fans. So what are the lessons learnt? The lessons learnt is, please accept that we know what we're doing, and we fought a long and hard battle in favour of the Wigan fans and the principles that we stand with. Secondly, learn to understand that we and Wigan Athletic work together very well. Thirdly, try to get the Super League clubs to consider a pragmatic solution that might involve 4-day turnarounds as the only solution. In the same way that Football League and Premier League clubs are having to accept 2-day turnarounds. You look at Liverpool playing last night, for example, and they're in the final on Sunday. You look at the current round of the FA Cup, where everybody is unhappy with the outcomes of when they're being played, fans particularly. But if you take the money of television, which we have to do to stay solvent as a game, then they call the tune. Now, in this particular case, it's not caused by Sky at all. It's caused by 4-day turnarounds and problems of fixture clashes that were anticipated but could not be solved.
Presumably then the fixture list as a whole needs to be looked at. For example, if we were to lose a game through snow, or God forbid two games to snow or something like that, you would have to slot in 2 extra games through the season, so you would have major issues down the line.
You've got to understand that the fixture list is full. And it is extremely difficult to fit anything in if there's a problem. Remember the difficulties when we played away in Sydney, and we had to fit, was it the Widnes fixture game, in midweek later on in the year. It's not easy to do with a congested fixture situation. And I think I would just ask fans, whilst understanding fully their annoyance, I really understand if you've got a season ticket and you can't make it on the Thursday and you'd made plans for the Friday. You have a total right to be irritated and annoyed at that. But I would just ask them to bear with us, because we have done, in this circumstances, everything humanly possible.
And I suppose at the end of the day, let's have the complaints now, but let's get here on Thursday night and let's get behind the team, because it isn't the players' fault, isn't it? And they need our support.
It's not the fans' fault, it's not the players' fault, it's not the club's fault. It's a consequence of fixture congestion and the difficulty that produces. And TV and Thursday night games makes it slightly more difficult, but they're with us forever. They're not going to change. In fact, it gets slightly more difficult. Because of my knowledge of the Football League, I know the immense difficulties that they're having fitting in 92 games instead of 46 games, because they took the extra money for 92 games, naturally. And now it's producing major problems in terms of fixturing, and fans are getting pretty annoyed about it. But football, like rugby, needs the money, unfortunately, and that's the reality of life, sponsored by television.